Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Marcus Hanscom. I'm your NAGAP Education Chair. I want to thank you for joining us for this session on how to create a proposal for our upcoming annual conference, which this year we've kind of given a fully branded name to, and it's our Graduate Enrollment Management Summit. It's still our NAGAP annual conference, but we've really titled it to really reflect what we hope will be really kind of the educational focus of the event going forward. And so we're really thankful for your interest in the conference, and I'm thankful for the group that you're going to hear from today. If you've gone to these before, you've probably heard my voice more in terms of a content session, but I'm passing the baton off to this great group that we've been fortunate to work with this year. We have a speaker development subcommittee within our education committee, and they comprise of Gregg Henderschiedt, Kate McConnell, and Tony Fraga, and they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves in a moment. But we're really fortunate. They are three of some of our best presenters and have been so engaged with the organization for many years. And I think really will give you a really in-depth, good view of what the opportunities are to present, not only with the conference, but also through our other professional development opportunities. And I hope you'll come to rely upon the three of them and hopefully the group going forward on how to develop any kind of ideas or pass along topics you have or pass along speakers you have, so that we can really build even more depth into all of the great work that we're doing across graduate enrollment management. So we're thankful for their work and their expertise, and I hope you'll use them as a resource going forward. And they have some great new forms on the website if you have an interest for a topic or a speaker that you can fill out on the NAGAP site at any time of year, not just during the proposal time. But I'm not going to speak any longer. I'm going to pass it over to Kate and have her get started. And if you have any questions, you'll see on the right side of your screen if you're on desktop, or likely on the bottom of your mobile device, where you can enter any questions that you have, and I'll make sure they get passed along to the group to answer before we end our session today. So thanks so much for joining us, and take it away, Kate.
Thank you so much, Marcus. We'll just go over a little bit of what we're going to be doing today, an introduction to the webinar and the content of what we're going to be speaking about. We're going to go over some of the proposal basics. We're going to look at the 7 educational domains that we'll be using for the upcoming summit, and then the critical elements of a great proposal. Of course, closing tips to you all, and then we're going to open it up for a little Q&A. So please don't be shy. Take advantage of entering some questions in the right-hand side of your screen there as you go along. And Greg, Tony, and I will address them later on. So there you see us. To my left, right on the left, you have Greg. Greg, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself to the group?
Sure. I'm at the University of Florida in the Department of Family, Youth, and Community Sciences, and I work with students throughout the GEM life cycle within our programs.
Thanks, Greg. Tony, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yep, I'm the CEO at Direct Development. We have been a long-time NAGAP supporter and corporate sponsor since going back to 2006, and I've had the opportunity to co-present along with many NAGAP members throughout the years, and happy to be part of the Speaker Development Committee.
Great, and I am Kate McConnell. I'm the Director of Marketing and Recruitment for Penn State at their Great Valley location in Pennsylvania. So I'm one of Penn State's 24 campuses across the state of Pennsylvania, dedicated only to graduate and adult education. And I've presented numerous times at NAGAP, and I'm proud to be part of the education committee here. And we're really proud to be part of this team that's hopefully going to give you some great ideas about a potential proposal we hope you'll be submitting for this year's summit. Tony? Thanks. So you saw on the opening screen just when the summit's going to be. Again, we need you to save the date. It's going to be from April 22nd to 25th. It's going to be in beautiful Orlando, Florida at the Lowe's Royal Pacific. And so the deadline to submit your proposal, all that information is on the NAGAP website, is going to be September 9th of this year, 2019. And make sure, as soon as registration opens, that you register for the conference, and also make sure you register for the hotel at the same time so you can get your nice room in beautiful Orlando. And the theme this year for the summit is going to be GEM Reimagined. So we're looking right now and want to talk a little bit about the goals of the education sessions that will be going on during the summit. And looking at proposals as you're going to be considering and what you want to submit, since the theme is GEM Reimagined, we really like your proposals to align pretty generally with the conference. And they can focus on all the various aspects of graduate enrollment management cycle. So from marketing all the way through student services to graduation. And we're really looking at that full funnel. And as we're going to learn a little bit later in the presentation, currently we have 7 categories in which the proposals would fall under. We refer to them as the educational domains. I believe Tony's going to go more in depth with you later about each domain. And these domains have developed over the last couple of years through extensive research that NAGAP has done, and also with feedback from our membership. So some of the guiding principles that we like to share with you today is, you'll see when you go to submit a proposal, there are 4 types of sessions. The first is a panel discussion, and I'll just tell you a little bit about a panel discussion. Ideally, on a panel discussion, we like to look at about 3 to 4 participants and a moderator. And so the potential panelists usually work together to submit a topic, usually around an area of expertise that's related to their experience, and that the moderator is going to tend to lead the discussion with a set of questions that ensures all those who are participating on the panel get a chance to share their expertise around the topic, and also encourage the audience to participate through a Q&A during the session, making it very interactive. The second type of a format is the standard presentation. And these presentations are done more like in a theater style, with an audience where the presenters, it could be 1 or 2 people who decide to present and submit a proposal together. And those presenters are really kind of encouraged to integrate media into their presentation. So by doing a PowerPoint, using video clips, using web links, the whole goal is to really engage the audience through the course of the session and provide very specific examples of about the subject matter, encouraging learning by all of the attendees that are there. So presentations really are structured so that a sufficient amount of time should be allotted for the audience participation. We want to make sure that those in the audience have things to take home, implement right as when they get back to their schools and colleges. So we do encourage, as part of the presentation, some time for Q&A. The third one is a special interest forum, which is led by facilitators. It's more or less a roundtable discussion during which attendees may discuss specific topics of interest, and those topics of interest are usually selected in advance in a small group setting. And the format should maximize the opportunity for open discussion among attendees and give those participants the opportunity to share their experiences, their thoughts, and their best practices. And the last type of a session is a vendor presentations. And this is where vendors provide an in-depth, exclusive product-based presentation on specific products and services. And there is a fee associated with that, and more information about vendor presentations can be found on the website. So some guiding principles to live by as you're looking at putting your proposal together is you want to be able to be sharing new information, of course, best practices in the area that you're going to be presenting on. Often we're looking for more engagement, less PowerPoint. I think the thing we encourage people is we really just don't want, pardon the expression, talking heads in front of the group. I think some of the best sessions that I've been a part of or I've presented in have been where the audience gets fully involved in a discussion on the topic. And I think you walk away with far more benefits from that type of engagement. And we also want to say, just when you're looking at your presentation, to consider the ethical implications of your topic within GEM. as I've mentioned numerous times, please make sure to allow time for Q&A. Some of the best discussions happen during Q&A, and the other things that happen during Q&A is you will begin to engage with other people who are attending this summit like yourself, and now you're developing some new friends, and you have new resources to go to when you have specific areas that you want to maybe explore on your own. And definitely when you're doing your presentation, you'll learn this further on in our discussion today, is you want to identify clear takeaways for the audience. So when they're looking at the synopsis of your presentation, they know when they go to that session what they're going to walk away with. And then the last thing I'm going to kind of look at is what's the intended approach. One thing I'd like to do is very much encourage you, no matter what level of experience you have within your profession, these proposals aren't merely qualifying people based on their years of experience, but rather, as it says here, the level of knowledge or expertise they have in an area. And so we look at things from a tactical perspective, the using, the doing, the implementing, and then also from an operational experience, the planning, the organizing, and the process. And then lastly, that strategic area, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation of what you're trying to convey and the topic that you're conveying to your audience.
As Kate mentioned earlier, there are 7 educational domains that you're going to choose from when you're submitting your proposal. And we're going to go over each one of them briefly because some of the categories are maybe more obvious than others. So as we go to the next slide, the first one is recruiting and marketing. And that one I think is fairly obvious and is the one that we get by far the most proposals regarding. And that is about marketing your programs. We're all trying to find new students, ways of reaching international students from specific countries, you name it. Many of the education sessions, if you've been to a NAGAP conference before, fall under this domain. Money matters can be a little bit confusing to people. Really, it has anything to do with funding and money. We all know that assistantships, scholarships, grants, foreign government funding, all these things are critical for us to have students. So anything information you have, expertise you have to share on that, things that you're doing within your operation to help students fund, we're all ears. Integrated operations is, we don't see as many proposals for this. It's usually at a broader level. This is anywhere that you are collaborating within your institution, among units, or if you have processes or applications that affect your institution across departments. So more of a senior level management type domain, but certainly one that affects most of us, especially as we're working, those of us who are in larger institutions. Student services is really anything that you're doing with your students once they've matriculated. That can be anything from orientation, working with students who are specific populations, student engagement, helping students cut through the red tape of higher ed, and so forth. Alumni relations across the student life cycle, we see a lot of really interesting ideas that people have, ways that institutions are utilizing alumni, from recruiting students, working with applicants, matriculating, and even fundraising for you. So anything you may have regarding that would fall under that category. Enrollment modeling and strategic planning, larger picture stuff, there are a couple of examples there. Usually senior level GEM professionals would be submitting something in that domain. And then career staff and professional development. This can be anything from staffing your operation, management of personnel, getting the most out of personnel, to general topics that can be of interest to any GEM professionals, things such as the intergenerational workforce, that kind of thing.
Great. And I'm just going to pause here, and if you have any questions or any thoughts on any of the previous slides you've gone in, please feel free to chime into the chat or put it in the questions area. I'm going to dive in here to critical elements of a proposal. And we're going to talk about, there's more sections when you go online to submit your proposal. There's probably like 8 different things you got to do. But in the interest of time, we wanted to kind of focus just on the most critical elements when you're building the proposal. The rest is pretty instructional and self-explanatory. We want to talk about title, abstract, learning objectives, and outline. And I'm going to give some examples of each of these, and Greg and Kate, please feel free to chime in on any of these. In the interest of time, we don't have time to kind of show lots of these, but I want to kind of give some instructions and tips on how to really impact these 4 essential areas. So first, starting with the title. The title, you really want it to be catchy and attractive, and it needs to also be a descriptive. Believe it or not, at NAGAP, we actually have a lot of long titles. Long is actually kind of okay. And over the years, many other conferences, you might see like really short titles, but NAGAP at the conference, we're pretty okay with having long titles to a point. Meaning it's okay as long as it's also accurate and compelling the reader to read the abstract. So you want the audience, the person reading the title, to say, man, I really want to read the description of this because that title's really catching me. So the purpose of the title is to get them to read more, really. And that's really where they make their decision on which thing to attend. So I'm just going to put a couple titles from some of the top winning proposals recently that Marcus shared with us. So like, Who's Afraid of Financial Aid? Graduate Merit Scholarships and How They Work. This is another one that's a little bit longer, but developing an effective evidence-based digital marketing campaign to meet institutional recruiting and enrollment goals. Man, just reading that title, I get a sense of what that's going to be about. It's very clear. Jumpstart your cohort, conversion and anti-melt strategies that work. Immediately, you can see how that title is connecting right to a pain point. If I'm someone who has, man, we're really struggling with melt, I can quickly see that's something I'm going to be attracted to. This might seem obvious, but it's really important that you spend a lot of time on the title. Now let's get more detailed. Let's talk about the abstract. The abstract is your session summary. And this is where you actually connect with the pain. Somewhere in there, you need to connect with my pain. You need to connect with pain that graduate enrollment managers have working in this field and dealing with their day-to-day. I've got to understand the why. You also want to make sure you're speaking to the audience. So it's okay to use you. Like, you will learn this. You will get that. I've got to understand what I'm going to get out of it. Another way I describe this is the abstract describes the meat of the session. You can't go into all the detail, but you should, after reading that paragraph, I should understand the heavy meat of what this is going to be about. And it should tell me what I'm going to expect if I show up. So I'm going to put one that I think is a great example from that last title that we had. I really like this abstract, and I know this is tedious and breaking every PowerPoint rule ever, but in the interest of really making this functional for you, I want to highlight a couple areas of what this does really well. First, in the intro, it's connecting with my reality. So it's connecting with my reality as someone, and it's talking about the hard work that's going into planning, recruiting, and admitting. And then it happens, and as you near the start of the term semester, your anticipated class begins to melt. Immediately, that sentence is connecting with my pain, right? And so it's telling me a story. I'm now attracted to this. And if this is something that appeals to me, I'm like, yes. And now it's starting to tell me who I'm going to hear from. Please join the graduate admissions team from the School of Public Affairs at American University to learn how, even in a highly competitive market, again, appealing to my pain, if I'm a school that I feel I'm in a competitive market, and how I can retain my cohort, meet enrollment goals, and deliver a promising class. And so I just feel like this is a great summary description. It doesn't give everything away, but it's very compelling, and I kind of know what I'm going to get out of it. Beyond that, though, one of the most important things that people can read at a glance is the learning objectives. These are really bullet points. It's kind of another way of describing the session, but by describing it with actionable and measurable takeaways I'm going to get. So the audience, the reader, should be able to say, if I show up to your session, I will walk out with these things. This is what I get to take and put in my bag. So generally 3 to 5 is good, and here's just some examples of them. These are just examples, but the tip here is lead with verbs and tell me what I'm going to get. I will be able to evaluate social media here. I'll be able to compare and contrast GEM at the undergraduate and graduate levels. I will be able to develop strategies to address student retention. All of these are clear, actionable takeaways. So believe it or not, I think this is one of the most important points that people look at, because when we're busy and kind of looking at all the sessions, we're reading the title, read this, the description, but this tells me what I get to take home and get out of it. So make sure you come up with 3 to 5 really awesome learning objectives, but that are really accurate to what people are going to get out of it. And then I want to close with the outline. This is tricky. So might seem super obvious, but the outline is important for the people who are evaluating these sessions, these proposals. I mean, it's important for the audience too, but with the outline, this helps in the evaluation stage understand the major sections that are going to be the focal point of the session, as well as the subtopics that the audience, that will tell the audience what each section will explore. So my tip here is that less is more, because it can be tempting to get really wordy here. And here's the trick. And I'm just showing one example outline. This is like a nice in outline format. But actually, and when I put this in here, it lost some of its formatting. So don't do it quite like this. You see how you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the subtopics are also numbers? You want to not do that. And I apologize, this didn't get pasted in right, but you want those to be A, B's, and C's, and I'll tell you why. When you import the outline into the NAGAP's precious site, it loses the outline format and puts it all in paragraph. So everyone reviewing this relies on the number 1 or the Roman numeral 1 and the sub points of A, B, C. Or you can do it reverse, A, B, C as your main, but your subs have to be a number, and that really helps the readers understand what is going to be included in the depth of how you're going to go through the session. So it's worth making it an outline format in your document, and when you submit it, just know that the numbers and the sub letters really help the people to evaluate and get a sense of your major primary points versus your sub points. And a little tip on less is more is try and get them all to fit 1 line. Like if they roll to 2 lines, it's too many words. Try and get each point to fit one line. Greg or Kate, anything you want to add on any of those 4 elements?
I think you brought it home well. I don't have anything to add.
Yep, I think you did it. Knocked it out of the park.
Awesome. Greg, tell us how proposals are actually evaluated.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to point out that we are nearing the 1 o'clock. We originally said that we were going to go till 1. We started a couple minutes late. We're going to continue. We don't have a whole lot more slides, but we do want to be mindful of people's time. Anyway, a little bit of a behind the scenes look at how proposals are evaluated. We look at them, we have multiple people reading each one, so you're not at the whim of just one person's bias. And we really do look, as Kate mentioned earlier, for proposals from any level of experience. You do not have to be a seasoned GEM professional necessarily, but you should have some expertise in the topic which you are proposing. The key elements that we look for, and we rank each one of these on a 1 to 5 point scale. As you can see, currency, importance, and appropriateness, purposeful outcomes, that well-defined topic and abstract that Tony mentioned, and the presenter's qualifications. So we add all of those up, and we use that raw score as a starting point for how the proposal is going to be evaluated. As was pointed out earlier, the deadline to submit is September 9th. We spend 2 very full months evaluating proposals. We get hundreds of them each year, and so we have a big crew of us, including 3 people from the conference committee and everyone from the education committee to look them over and rate them, and then we look at the averages of what those ratings are. A couple of things to consider, and this is where a lot of people ask about, well, what are my chances? How can I, besides the maybe obvious, follow the directions and whatnot? But a couple of things to consider. We get a lot of proposals under the recruiting and marketing domain, as we mentioned earlier. And for that reason, we're always looking for proposals from the other domains. To be honest, some of them we may only get a very small handful within that domain. In the interest of trying to really educate our members and the conference attendees about the entire GEM life cycle, we really do look heavily at those that are less common, because we want to make sure that you're getting a well-rounded view of what the field is. So do consider something outside of recruiting and marketing. Again, integrated strategies is less common. The Money Matters one is less common, but just keep that in mind. You can submit multiple proposals, and oftentimes people will submit 2, 3, sometimes 5 of them. But do focus on quality over quantity. I know some people, their funding to attend to the conference is contingent upon whether they're going to be presenting. I understand that. But even if you're submitting multiple proposals, you know, some of the feedback we've gotten from the membership in the last few years has been, I'm seeing a lot of the same faces, or I'm seeing one person doing 3 presentations. And we really are trying to cut down on some of that and really take advantage of the expertise that we have throughout our membership, because all of us have things that we can contribute and we can all learn from each other. We do want to ensure that all voices are being heard. Be specific on the topic and the learning outcomes. This is especially challenging because you know how it goes. The application deadline is in September. You know you want to present. You've got a kind of a general idea of what you want to present. So you submit this fairly general thing thinking, okay, if I get notice in December that I'm going to present, I've got all spring to kind of pull it together. But the more general, the more vague you are on the front end, the tougher it is for us to really evaluate it. So the more specific you can be about what that education session would look like on that day in April if you are accepted is really important. And then do consider the number of co-presenters you might have. I think it's especially common among new professionals to want to get 3, 4, or 5 people from the office to come together. You're all going to be attending as a group. It's a great learning project to work on it together. But just from the effectiveness of the presentation, when you get into 3 or more presenters, you're leaning a lot more toward a panel format. And you get into 4 and 5, it can really break up the flow of the workshop. And then, could you go back one? There you go. And also something to keep in mind, if you're not accepted, it's just the reality that we felt we needed to talk about ever so briefly. We get a ton of proposals for this event every year. We get more as years go by, and we have a finite number of education session slots during conference. I think they've expanded it about as much as anybody can take sitting all day, regardless of how good they are. And so we do have to turn down a lot of very qualified proposals. And I just want to put out there that the final decision of this, and I've been on the phone calls when we've made them, this is kind of like the Olympics where some people don't win by 0.3 of 1 second. There are, like, when you get to that level, these are all good proposals if they have really high scores on the front end. And sometimes it's based on how keen the competition was, how much we need representation in other categories, how much we've already heard about that topic that particular year. It could easily have gotten in last year or next year, but not this year. So something we like to remind people of is to think beyond the GEM Summit or the conference and realize that there are ways to get involved and to share your expertise in NAGAP year-round. One of the things that we've done on the Speaker Development Committee, which is Kate, Tony, and I, is to work with people to find ways to share your expertise. That can be a webinar. We have them every month that goes out to the national membership. That can be at a state or a regional conference. That can be an interview for a podcast, or you can write an article for Perspectives or some of our other publications. So don't think of, although I think we all think of NAGAP as, oh, it's the conference, where is it going to be this year? Understand that the learning is year-round, and there is an option on the NAGAP website on several pages for, I'm interested in speaking, I'm interested in a specific topic. And I encourage you to submit that through that as well, because that can be yet another venue. And this goes whether or not your proposal is accepted. We'd like to hear about your expertise year-round. And I think at this point we're on to Q&A. If anybody has a question they'd like to submit.
Yeah, so Greg, there's a question that came in that I think is most relevant to what you were just discussing, so I just wanted you to put a little finer point on it. But the question was, since the recruiting and marketing domain is where you get the most proposals, is there a limit on how many you'll accept for the domain?
I've never been in, and Marcus, you can speak to this as well, I think. I've never been in there where they've said there's a hard and fast number. We still take a lot of them regarding that in that domain. I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, that, you know, there's an absolute ceiling. But I just do know that in general, we try to, we have to be careful about how many of those we admit. But no, there isn't like a hard and fast rule to what we would, if somebody has a really good program or a really good perspective on recruiting and marketing, by all means turn in the proposal.
Yeah, and I think I would just echo with Greg there that we start looking at the entire pool of proposals together, and then start kind of making sure that we're hitting, as has been addressed here multiple times, how we're going to get across the graduate enrollment management cycle. And so we're a little kinder on, you know, alumni sessions, for example, than marketing and recruitment. And we often will also recommend, as we did last year, that several presenters, several proposals kind of get together and do one session together. So that might be something that would be offered to you as an option. And one thing I'll tie in too that hadn't been mentioned yet is that this year, for the first time, we offered our graduate enrollment, our NAGAP Annual Conference Graduate Enrollment Management Certificate. And we'll continue offering that for next year. We had over 200 participants, and it was over 100 that completed the certificate. And we'll continue to do that this year. And the intent on that certificate is not to funnel you back into our tried and true marketing and recruitment sessions, but instead to give you a really well-rounded graduate enrollment management certificate experience while you're there, so that you're coming out with some experiences outside of what you typically might be drawn to at the conference. So that'll be offered again this year, and that will change every year. So there's certainly, I think, a compelling reason to continue earning it if you choose to, because you'll get different topics each year. There was a question from, can non-universities, so nonprofits, submit proposals for a presentation or special interest forum? And I would say absolutely. And just, yes, go through the normal proposal process. Greg, I don't know, do you remember, have we had any nonprofits the last couple of years submit for the conference?
That's a great question. Frequently they have partnered with an institutional member, but I want to say we certainly had vendors, but I would again encourage the nonprofit to apply.
Okay, absolutely. Tony might be able to echo on this. There was a question regarding the Q&A portion of sessions, and would it be appropriate to use a live Twitter or Facebook interaction, I guess, for Q&A as part of a session? I know we're internet dependent to do that, but otherwise, how do you feel about that format, Tony, and any suggestions on that?
It sounds like that would be, you're talking about doing a live stream of the session?
Well, that wasn't inferred here. That's what I was trying to figure out myself, because I don't know where the live Q&A would come in, but maybe using that as a mechanism, or we could consider a stream, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if it's for the people in the room, I mean, we could do that, but it's normally not so tough where people don't feel they could submit their question live in the meeting. If we're talking about live streaming, I'm super open to that. I think that could totally work. I think Q&A, there's never enough time, honestly. I think there's always seems to be more interest in Q&A, and frankly, I think Q&A is the best part of most sessions. Like sessions I've attended, I love listening to how the presenters respond to live questions, because you really get deep insights there. And so, yeah, I've always found it a struggle to make more time for Q&A. So anything that would enable more of that, I'm generally a fan of. I just would be curious about how to set up something like live streaming, or where those questions would come in from.
I would second what Tony's saying about the Q&A also. I think that's where a lot of things develop, and I think people get a tremendous amount of takeaways, and they also connect with other members who they then can work with during and build a relationship at the summit and even afterwards as they get more involved in certain areas.
Yeah, and we actually got some clarification from the original person who asked the question, and he was wondering about engaging a broader expert participation during the session. So I suppose you have somebody that's kind of facilitating the session there live, but then having some more experts that are chiming in live on Facebook or Twitter.
That's a brilliant idea. I love it. You just would have to set it up, and I think you'd have to pre-set up who those people are, that they're available at that time. But honestly, that's not a bad idea if you had the right topic, and it really would benefit from multiple experts speaking in on those things. But I've never seen that. I think that is super cool, though.
Yeah, and he said he's already on it, so that's good. So we'll probably get a proposal from that. So I think that's great.
That's a great idea. Love it. Very dynamic.
Absolutely. There was a question regarding a checklist of what to submit. Now, if you log in, for any of you that are interested in submitting a proposal, you can go into the Presys site and you can start your proposal, but you don't have to submit it live there, so you can see the elements. But the elements are the 4 that Tony addressed earlier: your title, your abstract, which is basically your summary, the outline, and the learning objectives. So those are the 4 primary components, in addition to your main demographic information on who's speaking and your title and your experience.
You need bios for the presenters.
I'm sorry?
You need bios, good bios for the presenters too.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so those are the primary items that we're looking for. We do use speaker experience and background as a spoke of the review, but it's not the primary piece of the review. Can you guys discuss, the question is, could you discuss a little bit more about how a special interest forum is organized? Would I still be considered a presenter if I facilitate and discuss my experiences with a group?
Good question. I would think yes.
Yes, I've done special interest forums myself, and yes, you are considered a presenter.
Yep. Yeah, I would just, one thing, by example, we used, this past year, we created these advanced roundtables that were basically special interest forums, and we did, I think it was 4 or 5 of them. And the folks coming in were, many of the members of the education committee and other leaders in NAGAP, but we didn't come in as like the be-all, end-all about those topics. We were there to kind of spur the conversation, ask questions, have a general outline of what things are. So when we're trying to evaluate, if you put in for a special interest forum, we're just trying to get the sense that you have a skeleton for how do you think the hour will go or so, but more so that you're just going to kind of facilitate that conversation, but you don't have to be an expert on it. You don't have to deliver a lot of content, but just facilitate that conversation.
And Marcus, I did that this past conference with another NAGAP member, and it was, again, very, very well attended, very engaging. We really kind of just opened it up, set some initial guidelines, provided initial information on the topic, a little bit about our experience with the topic, and then we just opened it up to the group, and it was extremely engaging. And I think people walked away with a lot of practical, useful information. And that was really an experience. It was very positive.
Yeah, those roundtables are excellent learning experiences for everyone. So I think they're some of the most engaging and impactful sessions. So thanks for that, Kate. Question we kind of hit on a little bit, but which area you're typically in the most need of for proposals? And I would say broadly, any areas outside of admission and marketing, and that's not to discourage anyone who's doing marketing or recruitment topics, because we absolutely want you to submit anything and everything that you feel you have content to contribute and you have expertise. But we are really making a deliberate effort to engage other areas of the life cycle because we're all being asked to do more. So for example, financial aid or doing more alumni engagement, or doing more retention, and that may not have traditionally been part of an admissions role, for example, but we need some expertise in that. And there are a lot of folks within our membership that have that expertise that otherwise haven't really presented that in a broader way. So we really encourage you to submit in areas that are related to student services and the broader life cycle beyond marketing and recruitment, and certainly engage any other folks on your campuses that may be willing to join you. We'd love to have representation from financial aid, for example, or student life that would be willing to participate and share their expertise for graduate students and graduate enrollment.
And I think that integrated operations as well just lends itself to a great panel or to multiple people from one school who can talk, a rep from each organization, and how they were able to work together and solve a problem. It's just a great way to work with colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So here's a question. Any deal breakers that people should be aware of when conference proposals are being reviewed?
A deal breaker, wow. So I'm trying to think of a deal. Wow, that's a great question. I think if there's just no information, that somebody clearly threw something together in about a minute and there's nothing to go on. I've seen a couple of those where it's just so unclear as to what they would even be talking about. I've only seen a handful of those where I would read the proposal 3 times and I still didn't know what the workshop would be about. I think that's a problem.
Surface, it's like weak. It's just not really actually being specific enough.
Right, right.
They're not following the format, not really attempting to cover the areas that we're requesting that information. So you're really kind of just skimming across the surface.
Well, this question, I know Christy Ross, who works with us on our management side, she's lurking in the wings here as an attendee. But the question is, can we access past conference schedules on the website? I believe the 2018 conference sessions are still listed out there. We can try to get those links. We have all that information, so we should be able to share it with those of you that are on the call today, so you can get a sense of what's been presented in the past and kind of how we have kind of organized each of the sessions.
I don't know how it is with the current app, but I know on the last app we used, the last few years was still on there. So if you attended that and you used the app, you could go back and see what the schedule was.
Yeah, that's a good call, Greg. I actually just pulled it up on my phone. So it looks like the NAGAP app still has the whole schedule from this current conference that we just had in April. So if you want to check that, and then I think those, you're right, Greg, the old ones from 18 and 17 should still be on the old app, which I have to kind of surface here.
That was a guidebook app, it was called.
Yep.
Your guidebook, and you just download the year's thing. That's a great tip. I actually do that every year just to remind myself, like, what were the titles that got accepted, and it's a really great way to kind of get ideas on how to craft a really good title. Love that idea.
Yeah, that's great. I actually just pulled up the 2018 conference on guidebook, so it is still there, and 16 is on there as well. I didn't see 17, but it's probably floating around somewhere. Next question here. The time limit per session, I believe we're at 50 minutes. Does somebody want to correct me on that? Greg, do you know?
Yeah.
I think that is still correct, yes.
Yeah.
Kate says yes, definitely.
Yes, I said yes.
Okay.
Okay, and oh, here's a good question. What makes a good biography for a presenter?
Huh.
Oh, wow.
This is not official, and this is my opinion. I am less interested in reading all of the really long titles that higher ed graduate enrollment management professionals have. Don't use up your bio character limit with all of the possible titles you've had over the years. Rather, spend more time in the bio saying what you actually have done. I think that's, people are reading the bio, they really want to not just read the title, but they want to understand what your experience has been and why you're qualified to speak on this.
And maybe especially those part of your experience that are directly related to the topic that you're talking about.
Yeah, I would echo that with Kate, that your bio should likely vary based on how you're using it. So your bio will be made available to people that are looking at your session, and the more your bio underscores your expertise related to that topic, the better off you'll be. So the evaluation piece, we had a few members that missed the evaluation discussion on how we're evaluating sessions, but generally we're looking for relevancy, we're looking at quality of content, we're looking at kind of your outline and making sure you've got some depth to the material. You see the key pieces of the rubric are listed here on the slide, so thanks, Tony, for pulling that up. And as I mentioned before, we look at your experience, but that's only one of a variety of things that we're looking at. But we want to make sure it's a topic that people care about. Sometimes we get topics that are really, really, really specific. And I'm going to make up a random example, but it's like international credentialing in biomedical programs in Tanzania. Like, it's something extremely focused. And, you know, when you think of something like that, it's so laser focused that you try to think about, is that going to have a broader appeal to enough people that might come to that session at the conference? So we're really looking at currency and importance of that topic to be relevant to the group.
And what about redundancy? What about when there's 5 things on social media? You know, like, can you guys speak to how those are evaluated in comparison? Because, you know, I think it would be worth sharing, like, you know, obviously at the conference, we don't want too many topics on the same thing, even though I'm sure each presenter would say they have a unique thing. You got to think about these titles and the variety we're trying to give people.
Right. And Marcus, I think that that goes back to that question we had earlier about a deal breaker or a killer. Something that's extremely specific has a hard time making it. You know, it's a specific type of program, or, you know, specific country targeted. It can be kind of hard. It can be a great idea, but it's hard to see what the broader appeal would be for you know, the larger membership.
Yeah, and to Tony's question there on a lot, we do get a lot of sessions that are on social is a great example. Recruiting effectively is another example. So we'll often get 5, 10 top proposals on that, and there are often times that we're looking at quality among that list of them. So that's part of that. So that we'll kind of cull down a list based on the depth and relevancy of the topics within that category. And then if there are a lot that are very similar, as I mentioned before, we might suggest that they create a panel of those 2 or 3 or 4 presenters. And so ultimately, again, we're looking at kind of the greater composition of the conference, and social media is important, but we want to make sure that we're giving equal opportunity to cover other topics. So if there's something that's really hot right now, and social probably is one of the better examples, we're likely going to get more topics on that. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. So if you have expertise in other areas, maybe consider other things that might be a little bit more unique and something you have really specific tailored expertise to, that you could really lend that to the conference. There's a question about does submitting a proposal earlier than the deadline give you an advantage? I would say there might be a subconscious one. I'm not sure there's a deliberate one. So I think that signal, just like if people apply early to our programs, is there, but nothing specific that's going to help you. Although we are going to have to get stricter. We've had to get stricter over the deadline over the years as we've gotten more proposals. We have tended to kind of give a little bit of wiggle room around the deadline if we have to, especially given that it's during the fall season and we're all busy. But we've had to get less flexible with that over time as we've gotten more proposals. So I would strongly encourage folks that if you're interested in presenting, that you take the next couple of weeks to kind of formulate your ideas and get your proposal in before September, so that we really can start planning. And I know Mary Pasquarella, who's our education chair within the conference committee, is working on kind of a new process for us to evaluate and kind of piece together the conference. And when we're looking at, you know, a couple hundred proposals, it's hard to really whittle that down into a really good, and it's a lot of time and effort. And as Greg mentioned, it's a 2-month process, so it's not something we look at lightly. We take a lot of time to do it. One thing I want to mention too that Christy nudged us on, we are entertaining the possibility of having some 30-minute kind of power sessions, and I think this was actually a suggestion Tony had last year at our education committee meeting, where we can kind of give you more bite-sized topics that don't require a full hour-long workshop, but you can really kind of do a heavy hit on a particular topic. And we might have a series of blocks where you can go in and just get a quick 30-minute session on maybe 4 or 5 topics. So if you have something if your topic feels like you could do it in that kind of a session and you feel like it'll be really impactful and it doesn't necessarily have an hour's worth of depth, but it's something that's really important, make note of that in your description, and even maybe send a note off to Tony, Greg, or Kate, and just let them know that you're thinking about that, and that way we can follow up with you and determine if that's an opportunity.
And I just want to emphasize again, in closing here, Marcus, that Greg, Kate, and I are very open to evaluating and giving feedback on proposals if people aren't sure. So that's why Marcus put us together, and we're really committed to. We really want great presentations at the summit, and I know I've always appreciated other people looking at my descriptions and outlines and takeaways, and if people need another point of view on that, please email us, and that would be something that we could do to help people out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we don't want for any of you on the call that maybe have not presented before, or if you don't have a lot of experience, don't use that as a reason why you don't submit for us. We're strongly encouraging of people with varying experience levels, varying background. We have some people that are presenting that have only been in graduate enrollment for a couple of years, but they have a lot of experience in financial aid or in undergraduate admission. So don't use that as a reason. We often will, through the proposal process and other times of year, refer people off to the speaker development committee and have them work kind of with you and help you develop your topic, or recommend you, as they mentioned, to other areas, other opportunities, other channels to present. So don't kind of hold back. Feel free to put up your session regardless, and we'll find an opportunity to leverage your experience in one way, shape, or another, and really help you kind of hone that idea. Christy also mentioned here, so the Power Sessions piece, you can actually check a box on the proposal system in Presys if you want to be considered for Power Sessions. So I didn't realize we had done that, so that's good. And any of you that, if you want the slides from today's session, we'll share them out, and we're also recording this as a video, so we'll have this up on YouTube shortly, and we'll send you a link to that for everybody who attended, and make that available on the website. So any kind of final thoughts from the committee?
Just that we encourage people to be thoughtful about doing a presentation and realize that you really do have expertise, that you might want to stretch yourself a bit and consider either presenting individually, being part of a panel, or a special forum. So challenge yourself, because by challenging yourself, you're going to reap a lot of great benefits in the end.
I would say a challenge this is a call to anybody who has never presented before with NAGAP. I'm talking to you specifically right now. Make this the year that you look at what you're doing, think about what you know and what you think would be helpful to share with your colleagues, and make this the year that you do your first proposal.
Great. Well, Kate, Greg, and Tony, thank you so much for your time and for all of your great information here. And thanks everybody for attending this afternoon. We hope to see you in Orlando in April.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great end of your summer.
Bye.
Yeah.